You can see I have oxygen on. I actually have a rare genetic lung disease. It's fatal. I've lived longer than anyone else with this disease that no one knows why I'm still alive. But a lot of what has kept me alive with this crazy lung disease is that I wake up in this landscape of a body that's crazy. I have 10% lung capacity left. There's so many side effects, right? But I wake up in a landscape, and instead of scanning for problems, which is what we normally do, I scan for what it makes possible.
We have a great one for you this week with Zelle Nelson and Maureen McCarthy, co-founders for the Center for Collaborative Awareness. They have an incredible story. When they first met, Maureen had been diagnosed with an incurable genetic condition that robbed her of her lung capacity. So from the very early stages of their relationship, Maureen did not know whether she would see tomorrow. It caused them to develop these lifelong practices of self-reflection and other reflection. They really had to get to know each other very well to deal with the constant stressors of Mary's condition and the pressures it placed on their relationship. They've taken what they've learned from living in this extraordinary circumstance out into the world, and they've applied it to organizations, creating contracts between companies, into how couples can deal with each other. It's an extraordinary body of work, and I know you're going to get a great deal from listening to this very dynamic pair. Over to Zelle and Maureen. Welcome to another episode of Being Human. I am delighted to say I'm here with Maureen McCarthy and Zelle Nelson. They are the co-founders, co-directors of the Center for Collaborative Awareness. They're facilitators, they're social scientists. So it is with great pleasure that I invite you both to Being Human.
Yes.
Great to be here, Richard. Thank you.
Looking forward to a good conversation.
Fantastic. So for those of you who haven't heard of you and the Center for Collaborative Awareness, I wonder if you could, well, first of all, perhaps just talk a little bit about what the Center for Collaborative Awareness is and its mission. And then from each of you, I'd love to hear some of your backstory in terms of what got you interested in this work and ultimately to form this incredible organization.
Well, the Center for Collaborative Awareness is looking at, even the term, which is new to many people, collaborative awareness. If you think about self-awareness, which is sort of the awareness and knowing of who I am, who you are as yourself in relation to other people, we've been working in organizations around the world for years, and over time had come to the realization we would get these groups of very self-aware, really brilliant people together, and then things just fell apart, or they were struggling a lot, or just nothing was working in flow on a regular basis. We're like, how is it that really smart, self-aware people are still having challenges in our group settings? And we started researching the concept of like what happens to our brains and our bodies when we're in groups, which got us to create the term collaborative awareness, which includes self-awareness, but it's really looking at the awareness of who we are together. And in any relationship, there are always at least three entities. There's you, there's me, and then there's this third entity of we or us together. And you can see any group, any team, any family, any community, groups of people have their own personality, heartbeat, way of being, how we collectively deal with stress or deal with joy. So there's this collaborative space, this we, that is an ecosystem in and of itself. And in general, especially from a systems thinking standpoint, we often don't look at the whole. We're always looking at parts. And so collaborative awareness is, yes, we still need to be self-aware. I still need to know me. You need to know you. But then we need to exchange that information and start to design and build who we are together. So our work is really about designing collaborative relationships mindfully. Who do we want to be together? How do we want to handle stress? Like, who are we? What is this fingerprint, this heartbeat of our DNA?
Yeah, and it's really this piece around a couple of foundational pieces. Is how do you have a clear mind to engage with others? How do you design your relationships to actually work and flow well? And also this idea of we have this space where we approach the world as if everything's a problem. And we found that kind of energy and approach and looking at a system, especially people, doesn't give energy and life to who we are. So it's this continual question of what does this make possible? What does these people, this situation, what can we create together that we all want to move forward on?
We live in the architecture. Our entire humanity has been built on the architecture of problem solution thinking, which is great. I love problem solution thinking, especially when I need to fix my car or my refrigerator. But as we were in more and more organizations over the years, we realized that this problem solution thinking, which gives us a great dopamine hit when we get a solution, right? So we keep going after that. But what happens when you use it in context with people is that you're now labeling people as problems. So energetically, like if I said to you, we need to sit down and talk because you have been a problem and we've got to figure out how to fix you. Like no one gets more energy from feeling like they're a problem. And yet we're applying that same system that's built our corporations and governments and religion. Like everything is built on that sort of hierarchical system of like, let's look at the landscape. What's the problem? How do we put blame on whoever it is so we know what to fix? I don't ever want that part of my mind to go away. But a lot of our work is about giving people options so that I don't rise up and think, oh, you're a problem. There's another whole way of using our neural circuitry in a more connected way to actually create new possibilities. So we're trying to get people to be more aware of moving from problem solution thinking to what we call, what does this make possible thinking? So like you can see I have oxygen on. I actually have a rare genetic lung disease. It's fatal. I've lived longer than anyone else with this disease that no one knows why I'm still alive. But a lot of what has kept me alive with this crazy lung disease is that I wake up in this landscape of a body that's crazy. I have 10% lung capacity left. There's so many side effects, right? But I wake up in a landscape and instead of scanning for problems, which is what we normally do, I scan for what it makes possible. So yes, this is here. This is what I've got. What does it make possible in the world because this is the situation versus how do I fix what's broken in me? If that brokenness would have killed me a long time ago. So the Center for Collaborative Awareness is looking at giving people more options using this neural circuitry of what we call our connected brain neural circuitry versus our safety or protected brain neural circuitry in order to create more possibilities and use our co-creative energy really to create what we're looking for versus fixing what's broken. Because in all the chaos and uncertainty of today, we could spend 24 hours a day thinking about the broken things.
Right. And in fact, that's the way almost the world gets reflected back to us through media and so on, isn't it? It's in that frame of here are all the problems in the world and maybe here are some of the solutions, right? Yeah. That's brilliant. So I'd love to get into all of that. And as you said, that this, what do we do as individuals, what we can design together in the we, and then also this idea of possibility-oriented thinking. But I'd love to hear a little bit more of the each of your backstories. You know, what led you down the path to get so interested in human beings and how we work as individuals and together. Like, if I could just get a little bit of the backstory. Either of you, happy for you to go first.
Well, I mean, one of the pieces that's led to so many of the tools that we use and the things that we found across the world that have been like lit us up and we use in our business is when we first got together was the year that Maureen was supposed to die. That her doctors had said, okay, based on the life expectancy of someone with this disease, we're surprised you're still here.
That was 25 years ago is when they put me on hospice and told me to get my affairs in order. And that's when we met.
Yes. So there's this personal question of how do we do this together? We didn't have the, traditional idea of what I'm going to do with my parents and we're going to live for so many years and then retire and all those things that are in a set, idea of what most in our culture think is going to happen were not available to us. And so we were like, okay, what are we doing here? So there's that kind of impetus of designing really how do we engage with each other? How do I show up in this space? Like there's all kinds of things and feelings and stories that I need to look at and explore in myself. I'm curious about who she is and how we're going to do this dance together. And so we started to have some really wonderful design conversations.
We had no future,
Yes.
according to what he was telling us. What do you do when you have no future and you're in something today and you don't have the off the shelf idea of like, oh, we date and we get engaged and we get married and we live what, like we didn't have the white picket fence idea. So what are we doing?
Mm-hmm.
And that's where the idea of, we started a document that was our idea of like, if we have to design what this is, because we don't have anything off the shelf, what are we doing? And it became an exploration of like, hey, tell me about who you are. You let me see who I am. Let's exchange some of that information. And then let's start designing what this is on a day-to-day basis. This is not a forever plan. This is who are we today. So we became really aware of why we were in,
Mm-hmm.
which is so fascinating to do because you're not saying, oh, I'm in today, so now I'm going to be in forever. There's a real, I wake up, am I in today? 25 years later, we've still asked each other every day, literally, will you marry me? I'm not joking.
Really?
Every day, seriously, every day for 25 years now. We just in November had our 25th anniversary. And so it became it became a choice.
A conscious one.
A conscious choice of like, yes, like I still get that excitement. Either one of us can ask. Like this morning, he happened to ask when we got up. I still get that like excitement of like when somebody says, will you marry me? It's like, yes, like this is where I want to be today. But I don't think that would have, and it doesn't mean that we don't have all the same troubles as other couples and stresses and all kinds of things. I mean, especially with this disease, he could be crazed over all the stuff he has to, be part of because of my lung disease. But it's the way we dance through that. It's the way stress comes in and goes out. It does not stay and weigh us down. It's not the design around problems. It's the design about possibilities.
And when we met, we were actually both had our own kind of consulting practices. I was working with, how do organizations design their physical spaces to suit the people around them? And what would you say? Yeah.
And I was doing more executive coaching and facilitation for large group dialogue.
So we have this space where we're in our personal relationship, figuring out all these things and creating a document to design what's going on, and realized that it was really working well. We did the first document between ourselves, then our family, started doing with friends and things like that, and realized that this was how we wanted to engage in relationship.
The document he's referring to is called the Blueprint of We. It's a relationship design document. So there's 5 simple sort of components that each person involved in the relationship writes in a collective document. And then you write about and start designing together, speaking together about who you want to be within those same 5 components. Like, and it's it's the experience of saying, why am I in this now? Like, let's say the 3 of us were going to start a project or buy a piece of property. Like, why? There's billions of people on the planet. Why you two? Why now? Why the piece of property instead of something else? Like, let's just take a minute to figure out why we're here and why we're drawn to each of these people in the situation. When I know that, I'm filling the filing system of my mind, all the files I'm using over time that have garnered in my life to make meaning of today. Let me lay down tracks about why I want to do this with you. Then it's really looking at like, so let me tell you a little bit about who I am. This is what I look like when I am in flow. I show up like this. I talk like this. I act like this. I feel like this. Like, let me give you some of that. And then let me tell you some things that I would like to invite you to do to help me have more inflow days. How can you support that in this collaborative space? They're not demands, they're invitations. I can also give you boundaries. For me to have more good days, I would love for you to respect this boundary. Like, it's both, right?
Right.
And I'm also going to say to you, here's me on my most stressful day. It has nothing to do with you because I've done this all my life. It looks like this. I talk like this. I act like this. This is how I feel. And again, here are the invitations and boundaries around like what you can do to help pull me back from the edge. Like, I want to invite you to help me do that because when I'm in it, when I'm in the eye of the storm, it's harder to get out of it. That's a big piece of what Zelle and I created in the first blueprint of We was like, how do we get each other out of the storms by the other person telling us, not like me showing up and being like, oh, I need to do this, or let me try this, or like,
let me guess, let me try this thing that I think would work for me, but wow, that really doesn't work.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And so I'm just really curious about that first reaction that you had, knowing the situation that Maureen was in. And presumably you were faced with a pretty stark choice there about whether you wanted to continue. Just talk me through that sort of almost a courting phase there, and like when you found out and how you made that decision to stay with Maureen and what you saw in Maureen and the relationship. I'm fascinated.
I mean, funny enough, that implies that I was thinking about the future. What really made our relationship work was this idea that it didn't go past today. Like there was this, it was really fascinating to focus in on this present space and being like, okay, is this what I want to do today? And that's what we did for the longest time and continue to do it because it became such a good practice. I didn't really like take a lot of time thinking about what is the future. It's like, is this alive for me today? It was an interesting space because we neither one of us were willing or open to saying even like I love you for a while. It was like, oh, I'm connecting with you. I'm interested in you. I want to be around you. I want to have dinner with you. Like all those things were real, and I was like, okay, that's as far as I want to go. And that space, we tried to come up with another word for what we were doing because people outside of us were like, oh, you're in love. We're like, no, we're not. That's not us. We're in for today. And so eventually we did realize there's a crazy story with that. Maureen realized it before I did that we were in love, and I actually pushed it away at the very beginning. And yet very quickly I realized, oh, yes, we are. And now, okay.
How do you do in love one day at a time?
Yeah.
There's a thing about in love that projects more future.
Right.
It's longer term. Like you don't want to just be in love for the day, right? It was a whole different set of conversations like, oh, we have to design in love for one day. Just a day. What is that? And it's set a pace for our entire relationship when we decide, what do you do when you're in love you only get it for a day?
And it's not that we didn't, agree to things in the future, like, oh, yes, we'll go to that friend's wedding together. Or let's go on a trip in, September. We definitely did those things that everybody does. And yet there's this undercurrent of, do I choose this today? And that having that choice is really, really powerful and really engaging.
It's really exciting, actually.
Yes.
I'm still excited to be in this.
Yeah, it's almost like an accelerant for spiritual development, it seems like. It sort of almost forces you into the present, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
It's what does this make possible? This crazy situation made a lot of things possible. And then the tools that we've created over the years to help individuals and groups have a clearer mind, a way to handle their own stress and anxiety. And
because believe me, stress came up. The feelings of, oh, I need to take care of her or protect this or do this thing, all those, natural stories very much alive in me. Like, how do I question those? How do I figure out, oh, let me actually be willing to be vulnerable about what's inside of me? And, a lot of the design conversations where I'm feeling this. What are you feeling? What do we want to do with this?
How do we upgrade our brains together?
Yes.
How is my brain healthier because of what we're doing together? A lot of the tools that we've created are around that. Like I can be self-aware. I can use all kinds of things to upgrade my own mind. But what I've gotten from doing this now with many people is that I am way healthier when I do it in a collaborative way, when we're learning to upgrade our brains and our minds and the way we make meaning of the world together. It's an accelerator.
Yes.
Yeah. And Maureen, so what was there an evolution from you? Like, talk me through when you first heard you got the diagnosis and the prognosis for how your life might pan out, and you sort of how you evolved into what you present now as being someone so full of vitality and happiness. Was it just like a switch moment, or was there evolution? Just I'd love to hear that.
I was actually misdiagnosed for 7 years. It's so rare. The disease is only in women. It's a hormone-driven disease that fills my lungs with tumors. So nobody, like pulmonologists, had not even heard of it back when I first was presenting with it. So I'm the one who diagnosed myself. I'm the one who figured out what it was.
Wow.
So I did not have that moment of someone telling me this is what you've got and you're going to die soon. I'm the one.
And that was like Google research. Like, how did you figure it out?
It was funny.
Pre-Google.
Yeah,
I was just going to ask. I was wondering if it might be pre-Google. Yeah.
It was actually a funny thing. I knew that what they were diagnosing me with didn't fit. It felt really obvious. It's like, guys, keep looking. And then one day I was in the grocery store. You know how they have magazines at the checkout counter? There was a magazine. I'd never bought a magazine at the checkout counter before. I don't know why I bought this magazine, but I did. I got home, flipping through it, and I came upon a page where I felt like I knew somebody in the photos. I don't know why. That was just like this intuition. I studied the photos, didn't know anybody. So I started reading the article. And the article was about a woman whose daughter had my lung disease, who had started the foundation for it. And I'm reading her life and I'm like, that's my life. This is what I have. So then I started going to the library and doing some research on what that disease was. And then I presented all of that to my doctors. So there was
and they did some tests and
found out I was right. So I started with a curiosity. I'm a curious person anyway. I also have a lot of pioneer energy. So I'm always needing to live just at the edge of what's comfortable for me in order to feel alive. So it became an exploration of what this is and what it's about and who am I with it. I started thinking about my relationship to health, because our relationship to our bodies and our health is as much a relationship as mine is to Zelle. There is a relationship there. And it can be a really good relationship or it can be a really rough one.
Yeah.
So I questioned a lot of things. There was a part of me, I was going through I've had many, many surgeries. I was going through a surgery at one point, and there was a friend with me who said, I was very anxious about dying before whatever I meant to accomplish in the world was done. And it felt really stressful. And he said to me, you realize maybe what you're ultimately meant to accomplish is supposed to happen after you die. Like, how can you know? I'm like, I had never even thought of that. I was like, maybe that's true. And something happened in that moment where I thought, it felt expanded. Like, yes, however long I'm here, I'm going to do what I'm meant to do in the world. And I don't know what happens. I often say, whatever happens after death is like the movie It's a Wonderful Life with George Bailey, who wants to go travel the world, and he has his suitcase with all the stickers on it from the places. I feel like whatever comes after this is like let me go see what it is. Like, this should be really interesting and fun. Maybe the afterlife is whatever anybody thinks it is. Like their own, what they think is what it is for them. So I started thinking about not having this closed container of my life and death here. What is a more expansive way of experiencing an impact of who I am or what I'm here to do? And that was a really good little moment that switched a lot for me. And I have massive levels of pain in my body 24/7. I'm also violently allergic to all pain medication. So even my surgeries, I don't get pain medication. It's kind of nuts. So I had to I don't have this ability to sort of fall back into anything that soothes me outside myself like that. So I had to figure out my own brain. How am I relating to what this is? And a lot of a lot of the tools that we created have been about like changing physical and emotional pain, changing your relation to it. I've said for years, and now, just like in the last 5 years, science has now proven this. I've said for years that pain has two parts: physical, I think, and emotional in some way, but physical for sure. That there, 50% of the pain is just physically what I'm feeling, and the other 50% of the pain is the story we tell ourselves that it shouldn't be happening and it's never going to end.
Right.
And that story, which I think is like the suffering in essence, I've been able to shut that story down. I do not suffer over what I have. I have the pain. I can tell you right now, like where it is and what I'm feeling, but I'm not living in that space where I'm feeling the weight of it. And now they are realizing pain is happening in two separate neural networks in the brain. And one is the physical. They've actually done these studies where they figure out where the activity is in the suffering piece of the story part of the pain, and they can stop activity in that part of the brain. And then someone who's had chronic pain for their whole life suddenly can be like, yeah, it's a 9 right now, but they're much calmer and they're not feeling all stressed out about it.
Right.
It's a interesting journey to start shifting. I don't see the world as such a solid place anymore because of it. I've been able to shift so much of how I make meaning of everything. And it was a journey. I'm not saying I like woke up and it felt this way, but the fact that I had this pioneering energy to start creating things and sharing them with other people and teaching these things to other people as well has helped me, teach what you want to learn.
Yeah, that makes sense. And was that there like from the, because you get this magazine, you figure out you've got this condition, but presumably in this article it's saying, you're not going to have long to live and it's going to be painful, etc. I mean, and I'm just interested in the transition. Was there a sort of despair phase, or were you just able to immediately kind of absorb it and look at the positive?
I wouldn't say immediately. I probably was less. I have an interesting relationship to the concept of like victim mentality. I have to a degree all my life. I feel like I can experience something and be a victim of that experience. But the idea of taking that story forward, I feel like I kind of am rehurting myself every time I stay in that mode. So I do have a tendency to question how much of a victim I am, not for any other reason than it's easier on my body. It's physically easier when I don't feel like I'm a victim of something, including what's going on in my health. When I get stressed out, literally, I can't raise my hands above my head. I can't shower. I can't get dressed just because I'm thinking stressful thoughts. And sometimes I say I'm like a canary in the coal mine or something like that because I'm feeling stress much earlier than other people. But we're all doing it. We're all feeling that kind of stress. Mine's just known sooner. So it's a realization that, like, as soon as I stay in that victim mentality, I'm only going to hurt more. And I'm not interested in that. Like, it's just, I got things to do. I think that was it. Like, I had things I needed to do. So I can't be weighed down too much. Not that it didn't happen, but I didn't stay in it for great lengths of time. There'd be waves of it, but I didn't stay in it great lengths of time because I was always questioning whether that was actually feeling any better.
Right. Yeah. And was that, do you think that comes from your upbringing, your parents, or do you think that's something innate?
I wouldn't say it's my upbringing. I'd say part of it's innate and part of it's I don't know. Do you have a take on that?
I'd say, when she says like, I've got things to do, it's true. Like there's a practicality to Maureen that's really like, you wouldn't notice so much, but it's really strong. Like this, like she's got a migraine right now. Has had it for 18 years, something like that, 24/7.
It's one of the side effects of my lung disease.
You have no idea that it's going on.
Yeah.
But when she first started getting migraines, it was the traditional, I'm going to go in a dark room, I'm going to stay there and give me ice packs, let me away from everything. And they would last. And she's like, I just can't stay here. Like,
yeah, I was in bed for over a month with a migraine where I just could not function at all. And I was like, wow, this could be me that, the rest of my life, however long that is. I don't think I can do that.
So she had to pioneer and question their stories and start to find tools, find things in herself that would like allow her to um, live with this thing that most of us would be like, okay, I'm checking out. Um, and she's like, oh no, I got to be here. She has a desire for life that's infectious. And
I'm also okay if I die tomorrow.
True. Yes.
Yeah. There's not a, like, I got to stay
We've questioned
here.
those stories about, well, what is death? What does it look like? And why are we all so afraid of it?
And the fact that Zell has spent so much time questioning his own stories about caring for someone and being with someone with this kind of situation is immensely helpful for me. I often call it the difference between worry and care. So worry is a whole neural circuitry in our mind that's a fear-based, stress-based relationship to whatever's going on. When someone worries about me, it's actually really hard on my system. But you can take the same thing of what's going on with me
and the same actions.
Yeah. And go run it through your neural circuitry of more connection and care. If you care about what's going on with me, or if there's anything I need, or how can I be with you in this, that's a very different energy than worry is.
And that leads to a lot of our design conversations that we would have at the beginning. Like, so she would be having a migraine day, and my tendency would be, okay, let's wrap her in a blanket and bring all the kinds of things that, would make her feel better. And every once in a while, that's what she wants. But more often, she wants me to be, oh, I've got energy. Let me demonstrate it and be that and show up that way. And she can then say, oh, that's where I want to go too.
One of the things when I'm in a lot of pain, I ask him to go for a run. Because running is really good for his system. Like, he's very aesthetic. So
yes.
Going on a run is great for his mind and his body. So if I want the energy around me that's like healthier, I'm like, go for a run. And when you come back, like, I will feel better because of that.
Because I'm energized and I'm engaged. And that's, she's like, oh yes, that's where I want to be.
And he doesn't have to go for a run. It's not like I'm not going to feel good unless you go for a run. It's just like, hey, would you consider going for a run? If you want to know how to help me today, would you consider that? And 9 times out of 10,
invitations, as you were alluding to earlier. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah, and that gets back to the whole relationship design. Like, how do I help the other person have more inflow days? How does she help me? How do we engage in that dynamic, which is life-giving? And a lot of it is a curiosity process of, I don't always know all the answers of what's going to give me that best day. So I got to try some things out.
Yeah. And it's really coming through as the two of you speak that this process that you're in inquiring actively, consciously, what works for each of you. You've got self-awareness and you've got kind of other awareness, right? I'm getting this real strong sense of other awareness that's not common, even in couples, right, who've been married for
Yeah, it's really true. I often think about it as a dance where, let's say, like, traditionally, a man leads, a woman follows. You ask me to dance. We get up and basically kind of might trip a little bit, but we figure it out. Yeah. And in our world today, with everything so different looking than it's been before, it's kind of the equivalent of, if I were asked to get up and dance with another woman, we don't have any rules now. What do? Well, we need to take a step back. I need to ask myself, what dances do I know? When should I lead? When should I follow? She needs to ask herself that question. And then we need to come together, exchange that information, and then design based on that what dances and who's going to lead and follow when. And that's, in essence, a great analogy of what we all need to do. There's so many differences in what our culture brought us up to believe would be our future and what's actually being our future. Yeah. And we're in this transition phase of a great unknown. So now is the most beautiful time to say, hey, let me step back. Let me capture who I am, what I know, because we're moving in between people faster than we ever were before. There's also a portion of, or a type of blueprint of we that we call a blueprint of me, which is here's who I am. Here's how I work best. This is what I'm all about. My blueprint of me describes lots of things about me, creates the invitations and boundaries. It goes on my auto signature of any email I send out. It's available on the website. Like it's a way to say, hey, I'm going to interact with a lot of different people just to like have shorthand. Here's who I am. I invite you to tell me a little bit about who you are. And now let's get going and see what we can create together. But there's a really beautiful opportunity here with all of the uncertainty and changes for us to design new possibilities instead of feeling weight of the problem solution. We got to fix everything we had before.
Yeah, and that was what because I've done hundreds of these shows now, and I get sent the bios of the guests, and I read the bios and something. But there's something very different about having read your bio, Maureen. It's so open. It's only a sort of page or so, but it's just the nature of that document gives me such insight into who you are in a way that you certainly don't typically get on
Right.
the standard bio you might find, because I'm getting insights into how I might interact with you, the behavior I might expect from you. I mean, it's just another level, deeper than you would ever ordinarily
And
get.
a general invitation for you to ask me more.
Mm-hmm.
So it says, and there might be boundaries where it's don't ask me more. It doesn't mean it's like open season for somebody to ask anything, but there's an ability to be more present with feeling like, hey, I want to, you showed up in the meeting like this the other day. Like you were tapping your pen the entire time. Like, was anything going on for you? Like, it's just a way to get out of our heads a little bit. I also love this in like entire organizations do the blueprint of we. So there's an internal system of documents where every team has a blueprint of we, every individual has a blueprint of me. So I'm new to the company. I come on that part of the website and I find out like, here's what my team is about. Here's all the things like, here's how they've custom designed how to get their work done.
Next week, I have a meeting with Mary. I've not met her before.
I can imagine you being at an organization where everybody has got these documents available. Yeah.
Yeah. It's fascinating to see how different that can be when it's accessible to see what we're designing.
And it includes kind of practical things as well as, kind of behavioral things. So like, for example, I was meeting with a new client and they had emailed me first thing in the morning, and I have in my blueprint that I generally have, my mornings are project based and I'm not engaged. So I read this email at 11, and so there's the first email that says, I need this soon. How soon can we talk? And then 10 minutes later, there was another email that said, oh, I recognize that you're probably in project mode. Contact me when you're out of your, phone. Yeah. And it was like, oh, I mean, I don't know. I can imagine what this client could have been going through their head. Like, why aren't they responding to me? Or can I count on them? Like, what I need this person right away. And then they had information about, oh, well, he's in focus time, so he'll connect with me when he's out.
Yeah.
And that was like, great. That really like sped things up for us.
I love that. And I definitely want to dive much more into the blueprint of me and we, but I'm burning to ask Maureen just in terms of this extraordinary ability you have, right? Because in my mind, I'm like, how did she get this diagnosis? How did she learn she was going to die or likely to die in a certain period of time? She's right now on this podcast with a migraine. Like, so you've got all of it, and yet you stay so positive, so curious, so energized. Like, I guess my question is, what if you were to sort of boil it down into some insights that people could take away in terms of living with pain and stress? Like, what do you share with people when they ask you, like, how do you do this?
Okay, so I'm a very visual person. So let me give you this visual. Imagine you're standing at the top of a snowy hill with a sled in your hands. And if you go down the left side of the hill once, twice, 3 times, it creates a rut in the snow. And then you don't need to steer anymore. You just go down, right? That's an analogy for how neural pathways get made in our brain. So we have this sled that goes down, I think, a stressful thought a few times. And my subconscious mind says, hey, let me take care of that for you. You think that guy doesn't like you? Well, let me think that for you 24/7, like under the surface, so you don't have to like use brain energy to relearn it. So I have these neural pathways down the left side of the hill. And if I want to create a neural pathway that's a more positive perspective on the same situation, I need to put my sled down the right side of the hill and create another option. But the idea of like dragging the sled across the snow to go over to the right side doesn't work for me. So instead, I need to pick up the sled. And the analogy of picking up the sled is there's an awareness phase of all of our stressful thinking about things. Our culture has given us a story about dying soon, dying with young children as a mom, what it means to be unhealthy, to not be able to breathe. I've been on oxygen for 20 years now.
Yeah.
And which seems crazy, right? It's just like Zelle doesn't even see it on my face anymore. So there's an awareness phase that's really important to just pick up my sled and go, oh, there's me worrying about dying soon. Oh, look at that. I'm thinking that I can't make it through another day with my lungs feeling this much pressure. I have those thoughts, but my practice has been, and what I cultivated early on was how do I pick up that sled, which another visual for me is when I'm in those stressful thoughts about my health, about life, whatever, I'm actually feeling like I'm in the eye of a storm. And so all of that is running, right? All the sleds down the left side of the hill are running. And when I pick up the sled, I begin to just, and in this awareness phase of like, wow, look at me doing that again. I don't need to change it. I don't need to fix it. I don't need to do anything different. I just need to like give myself a time frame to get really aware that I'm doing it. Because my subconscious mind is what's running that thought. There was a file that got put on when I was young about how you don't want to die, right? We all have this don't die thing, right? It's very embedded. So I have the awareness. When I have the awareness, I begin to push the storm 2 miles off the coast. It's really interesting just go through a month, like a week, a month, where whenever you do this habitual thing that you're thinking that stresses you out, just give yourself a time frame and say, okay, I'm just going to be aware of it. I'm just going to notice that that's the sled down the left side of the hill. And I'm going to pick up the sled in order to do that. That's what picking up the sled is.
So I'm just going to give myself a day or a week of just, my only goal is to just get present to, I'm in this,
yes,
let's say, negative thought pattern.
To interrupt this idea that this is happening to me, or it's all me, it's happening, and I need to interrupt and pause.
Yeah.
About how I'm going to feel about what's right in front of me.
But I just need to know first what my brain is. Here's the thing. Nothing has any meaning in the world, ever anything, until we assign it meaning. And I can only assign anything meaning based on what I call the filing system of my mind. So over the course of my life, I have all kinds of things that I've taken in, what my best friend and my parents said in a movie, in a book, and whatever. I have all these files. And I see something in front of me, take things in through my senses, and then I go through the filing system and I pick out the file that's like, okay, I'm going to make meaning of this, which is what I do when I meet a new person or have a new pain in my body. I make meaning of it. So I'm now beginning to look at, oh, wait, what's in the filing system? If these are the files that are going to make meaning of this pain or this situation, let me know what's in the system. Let me check that out first. That's pick up the sled. Let me be aware of what's in the filing system.
Yeah.
And then once I've done that for a bit, I can begin to put my sled down the right side of the hill with a more connected, calm, healthy perspective on whatever that situation is. Not because that's what I need to do instead. I don't ever want to demonize the sled down the left side of the hill, my stress, my depression, my anxiety. I'm not demonizing that because that's problem solution thing. That's trying to label that or myself as a problem. And if that's the case, then what I really need to do is pick up that sled, put it down the right side where I'm giving myself another option. It's a lot of where my tools came in. Is like, how do I create another way of looking at this? And part of what I'm doing is giving myself more options, more possibilities. I'm curating a fuller filing system of both what I term safety brain files and connected brain files. So safety brain is down the left side. It's fear, it's protection, it's worry. And connected brain is down the right side. Both of them have a possibility. And I want to make ruts because our brain makes neural pathways on the right side of the good stuff just as much as the negative. It's just because we live in a problem solution world and we scroll the news and we listen to the things that are wrong in the world, we are curating so many files on the left side of the hill. there are so many files every day that I'm getting about what's wrong and what's scary and what's stressful. And I'm trying to curate what's good and what's possible and what I can create and what's another option, because it does make me feel better. And I want to make sure I get those ruts in the snow. So I'm often thinking about when I get into a stressful moment, I'm like, okay, pick up the sled, just pick up the sled, be aware for a minute. Now I filled my filing system to such a degree with the more mindful, energizing options that I often say now it's like joy is my autopilot. You know, when like a stressful thought gets you out of nowhere, you didn't go looking for it, it just got you. I have that for joy. Joy just comes and gets me sometimes.
Yeah.
In the same way that stress used to. It's not
Wow.
all, but I'm more on that side than I used to be because of the years I put into picking up the sled and then creating a new story. One of the things we're doing now that we're actually kind of beta testing, and we'd love to have it go wide, it'll be really interesting. So we're doing this emotions experiment. The more that neuroscience is understanding how emotions are made and how emotions are actually one of the biggest factors in how we make meaning of the world, how we see other people. So in looking at how I'm cultivating my filing system about my emotional experiences, responses, what I'm pulling, I realized that I wanted to come up with a list of positive emotions. And so I went and Googled positive emotions list. Well, no one out there had a just positive emotions list. They were all positive and negative. And every list had like 2/3 or 3/4 negative words and like a third or a quarter positive. I was like, that's really interesting. Like, but of course it makes sense. We live in a problem solution world. We're thinking about problems more often. So I'm like, okay, how do I cultivate more of the emotion experiences and even words in my filing system of feeling positive things? And so I took a bunch of positive emotions from lots of different lists. I created a list of my own, which now, God, it has like 200 words in it. I put it in a note on my phone. I've now shared it with lots of people. And here's the experiment we're doing. So I want to have an experience of filling my filing system with more positive emotions to be able to choose from. So each day, we're putting people in small groups, 2 people up to 4 people. And every day in your little group, you go to the emotions list, you choose an emotion, scroll down, pick one you want to feel, pick just a random number. It doesn't have to be anything you're feeling. Just pick something. You're trying to curate the files. So let's say I pick joyful. Now I go to Google and I do a Google image search for joyful. Now I get to scroll through images of joyful things. That's helpful, right? I'm watching that instead of the news. And I'm also taking into consideration that every image that shows up for joyful was put online by someone who was also thinking about joy.
And
who was,
labeled it joy.
Yeah, and labeled it and created the image and loaded it to the internet. Like there's a network of joy out there that I'm now perceiving myself to be a part of.
Yeah.
And then I take that photo and I go into my text with my small group and I say, joyful is my emotion today with my image. And I send it to everybody and they send me theirs. So I think we have like maybe 8 or 9 groups that we've started with now. We've been doing it for about 6 months. And oh my gosh, it is fascinating. It is fascinating how much more other joyful or other positive emotion words are showing up in my vocabulary. I feel the joy of seeing what other people are sending me. So it creates a connection between the different people I'm doing it with. It's
fascinating. I mean, Richard, we have a really great life. And I was thinking, oh, this is going to be a tiny little blip on my experience. And I crave it now. It feels good. I get good emotions. It impacts me. I miss it if I, don't do it or I'm busy or something. It's like, I want to feed this, like Maureen's saying, this curated space of engaging, feel good emotions, because I show up better. I have more of myself at my disposal to engage with the world, whether there's a crazy thing that comes up that feels stressful. I have a greater resource. I have more options to choose from of how to engage in the world, and I think that's ultimately where we're talking and where Maureen started with this. It's where our relationship started. You have a choice. in any given moment. And picking up the sled is oh, wait a minute. This isn't, truth with a capital T. This is not the only option of pain and stress. And yeah, in the beginning, I got to pick up the sled and just find out what are the files that are telling me that this is a horrible thing that's right in front of me. And that, eventually, if I follow this path, I'm going to die alone and unloved, because that's what our brain does. That's what anxiety says, is if this happens, I'm going to be, I'm on a desert island by ourselves and going to starve. That's what we do. And it's like, oh, wait a minute. Let me just pause a moment and see what other options are even on the horizon. And that first pause is the way, just notice that that's a thought I'm thinking rather than reality.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think as I reflect on this process, because I'm just imagining myself right now, if I had a migraine, the predictable thing would be either I email you before the show and say, actually, guys, I'm feeling sick, or I'd be like, no, Richard, let's kind of grind through it and make the most of it and just see if you could do this and the migraine and get through it, right? But you're describing, I'm just experiencing you as something, right, an expression of joy, right? Yeah. That's what makes me so curious is, it's not like you're doing it in spite of, it's like you've entered a different reality somehow, right?
I would totally agree. It is a different reality. My mom often says I'm not the child she gave birth to because I'm better. It's a different reality. It truly is a different reality. And we do make our own reality, literally. Like neuroscience, quantum physics, all are in a full understanding now that is very true, that two people aren't necessarily seeing the same things, because you can only see something through the lens of your own filing system of your mind. And I have completely upgraded mine. I have many files that are such a different reality. It's kind of crazy. And I've gone back and I don't know how much time we have. Do I have time?
As much as you like. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. So here's one of the things that I started doing years ago that now many of our clients do. So I had read an article. I can't find the article now. I thought I had bookmarked it, and it's been a while. It was either by a neuroscientist talking about quantum physics or a quantum physicist talking about neuroscience. But what, in general, what the notion was if quantum physics says there is no space-time continuum, that all iterations of everything are happening simultaneously. The notion was that neuroscience now knows that you cannot call up a memory of something without encoding it with something of today. It's impossible to put pure memories back into our system. So every time we call up a memory that was painful and then add some more that was really awful and that was a terrible thing they did to me or whatever, we're literally adding more information into that memory. And the notion by this writer was that if you can call up a memory from your past and encode it with the wisdom you have today, with something like a better understanding, more empathy, whatever, you can actually change your history. Not you'll feel better. Just literally, you could theoretically, you can change your history so that you have a different one. So I got really curious about that. And I started doing this practice. I wrote down a whole bunch of instances where I went through really stressful things. So the first one I did, which was kind of crazy, when I was 4 years old, I was sitting in the kitchen in this little alcove in the little children's table, and my parents were arguing in the other room, and they came through into the kitchen, didn't see me, and were fighting. And my dad said, I'm leaving. And my mother got scared and she wanted him to stay. So she punched her arm through a glass window. And she came back out, and there was shards of glass on her arm and blood spraying all over the kitchen, the ceiling, the refrigerator. I can see it like it was yesterday, right? And here I am, 4 years old, watching this whole thing. So in the thought of changing my history, I took myself, my current day self, with all the wisdom that I have now, all the understanding of people and pain and whatever, and I sat myself down on another little chair at the children's table with 4-year-old Maureen. And I said, okay, we're going to stop this scene, and I'm going to explain to you what's actually going on here. Because I know you're seeing it one way, but let me tell you what's really going on here. I said, first of all, there is nothing happening in this room but love. People calling out for love, people wanting it and not knowing how to get it, people being afraid that they are not loved. it is love. It's just love. And I said, and second of all, mom's going to be fine. She's going to go to the hospital. She's going to get stitches. She'll be just fine. And I know you're freaked out about the blood that's spraying all over. I said, but blood is a liquid just like water. So imagine if you took the sprinkler, you know how you love to run in the yard in the summertime through the sprinkler. If you brought the sprinkler into the kitchen, it would spray water all over the ceiling and refrigerator. It would spray everywhere because that's what liquids do. Blood is just a red liquid and it will spray just like water does. This is nothing to be afraid of. So I walked her through who my parents were, what the scene was, how she could feel calm about it. And I can't explain to you, but I've now done this on hundreds of things in my life, literally over the years.
Right.
I am not the same me. I do not have the same history.
Yeah.
I've now upgraded so many stories with the wisdom of who I am today. And those files are now encoded in a new way. They've been put back into the filing system of my mind. And I have healed more relationships. I have become closer to people who I wasn't close to. I have stopped judging people I was judging because I encoded my wisdom of today instead of just keeping that file a stressful filing system. And it is fascinating to see how many other people have changed like major things in their life just by encoding those stories with their wisdom of today. Now, of course, you have to go find the wisdom of today first. If you don't have it, you gotta take a look at it first. But then once you have it, it's not just like, oh, I know better now. It's like, oh, I can actually turn around and give that to my other self and upgrade the whole system.
Yeah, no, and have the courage to make that list and go, go back to those places and pull up the memory because even if you're going to rewrite it, you're still going to have some pain in bringing it up. Yeah,
sure.
But it seems to me, and I really relate to that with my own therapeutic work and going back and having empathy for those early experiences I have and creating for myself a new history. I mean, that really aligns with my experience. But what you've done, it feels like a sort of an extreme version of it where you've lifted it, to this level now where present moment, I can create an entire new reality for myself that differs from that which I would create naturally from these pain signals I'm getting. Right? It's like it's almost like you've elevated the art to something quite extraordinary.
Yes, Maureen's told the story. I know the story. I love the story. I love hearing it. And in your question, I just had another experience that's a new nuance. Now, Maureen's history is that when she was 4 years old, her parents walked into the room and they were loving each other to the nth degree as best they could. That
End of story.
That is a whole different experience than what we would culturally put on this idea that two people are speaking loudly to each other. And that's
it's meaning making. It's changing the meaning making because I get to make meaning of everything I see.
And that brings more of me into being with you.
And to creating something that's life-giving versus feeling the weight. When I feel the weight, like I told you, I can't do anything. So if I felt the weight of those kinds of things, I wouldn't have the energy to go out and do more good in the world, to create more good in the world, to impact things other people might call problems. It doesn't give us energy.
Yeah. I mean, it's and it reminds me of some of the spiritual practices that sort of monks and so deliberately engage in, right? They'll go and sit out in the snow all night and deliberately force themselves in a position where they have to dissociate from, or not dissociate, but develop their mind in order to be able to have a different relationship to physical discomfort and pain. But you've at least my experience of you is you've reached a level of mastery with that, which is quite extraordinary.
I'm very lucky, and I've cultivated the relationships around me so that there are other people. I don't do this alone. I do this collaboratively. That's the collaborative awareness. There are people in my orbit that are also in service of that in me because we've done the blueprint of we together because we have we use the tools of a clear mind together. You can get a group that might do a blueprint of we, but unless they're also using some tools as a group to have a clear mind, to be able to question their stories, to try to move from judgment to curiosity, then all the design you create doesn't have weight unless you're looking at the filing system of your individual and collective mind. There is a collective mind, a filing system of the we.
Right. And so in this system, because if a team were to take this on, or an organization at large, there are going to be people who are at different levels of willingness to look at their own stuff, right? So how do you operate in that environment where people are, well, actually, I don't want to work on myself. I'm not interested in this. How does the system adapt to that?
Well, because it is always an invitation, if I'm bothered by the fact that you don't want to do it, that's not your work, that's mine. So now I want to use the tool to figure out why I'm judging you for not wanting to do it. I always want it to be an invitation. It is never about someone being uncomfortable, but there are plenty of our tools that are not. I mean, the one I described to you about going into my history like that, that's the rare thing that I might be using in coaching. We're not sitting down doing that as a group. But there are plenty of tools where even the pick up the sled analogy that I told you, we have exercise like in a group. So let's say we have a team in the room and we put up on the wall, there's 3 columns, like a big sheet up with 3 columns. And on the left side is our safety brain, left side of the hill, stressful way of being. On the right side column, it's the way we are when we're in flow and we're connected. And then in the middle column, we have them list out what are different things you do together on a daily basis, everyday things as a team. Have a meeting, answer something a client needs, deal with a client who's unhappy, whatever the things are, just list a whole bunch of things. And collectively, the group starts talking about, okay, so if we're all, sled down the left side of the hill, collectively we're in stress. What do we look like? How do we have that meeting? How far do we get on our agenda? How do we make decisions?
How do I respond to the client? What's going on in my head? Where's my anxiousness about this situation?
Yeah. And they know. Every group knows what it looks like. It's fascinating. They may never have thought about it, especially not together, but they can tell. Now flip it to the other side. We're in flow. We're feeling good. We feel connected. Now, how do we have a meeting? How do we get this task done?
How do we communicate? How do we engage with each other and with people around us?
How fast does the meeting go when we're connected versus in stress?
What kind of ideas do we have?
So then as you get those lists of either side, then at the end, you ask the group, like, okay, pick one of these things where you want to experiment. All of our work is about experimentation. It is not about, I know this now, I got to do it better forever. It's like, nope, just do an experiment time frame. So for the next week, the next 30 days, or the next 3 times you're going to do it, let's do an experiment of doing it in this inflow state. We're going to all be very mindful of being in inflow when we're having the meeting or taking care of that task. And what does it look like? Like how in that experiment, you're going to pay attention. How did it work to be in that space? How different was it? What new ideas or thoughts came in? Because there are entire neural networks that shut down when we're thinking about a problem. It's so fascinating to me. Like that tunnel vision of problem thinking is because it was built originally for us to race out of the forest when the bear was coming at us. So when I'm in that space of a problem, I have to get tunnel vision. I can't let in so many other things, creativity, often empathy, connection, because I've just got to pay attention to the things that don't make my brain use as much energy. I've got to focus in on the problem, right?
Oh, right, yeah.
It's why we become divisive when there's stress, because I can't let in anybody who doesn't think like me, because that takes more energy to deal with when I'm in a problem thinking mindset. So when we're all in this connected space doing this team thing together, then our whole brain lights up in different ways. There are entire neural networks that go online, including our co-creative spaces. They get more vibrant. There are more possibilities at our disposal. We can see more possibilities because tunnel vision isn't happening. Literally, there's more on the horizon than if we're in the tunnel vision of the problem that's happening. So more possibilities suddenly come out of nowhere. Like I call it magic, not logic, because sometimes I can't explain it.
Yeah, and also what you said there about energy is interesting. That we're giving us, because we're in this problem solution mindset. We're like, there's also a script running there which is must conserve energy, right?
Yeah.
And so, because I need it to run from the tiger or whatever it might be, whereas if I've not got locked into that, I'm in a state of, I have an abundance of energy.
Yeah.
And
True.
so I have got time and space to explore.
Yeah. I mean, if I was in stress, well, first of all, if I was in stress all the time, I'd be dead. But let's say I'm not dead. I would be knocked out in bed. Like I couldn't move. I mean, it's a miracle that I'm doing anything, that I sit up, that I mean, I can't explain to you the number of side effects that this lung disease has. It's crazy because it's hormonally driven. And there's a lot of weird hormonal things that go on. So I know firsthand how much that kind of the sled down the right side of the hill, the connected brain version of who I am with other people gives me way more possibilities, including sitting here with you, having this wonderful conversation. Like I'm thoroughly enjoying myself. And that's because I've widened that scope and I'm not in the tunnel vision of problems.
Yeah. And with this one tool to pick up the sled, we can become collaboratively aware of who we are as a group, how we show up when we're in stress, how we show up when we're in flow, and what are the things we start to design to have more inflow interactions.
Yeah. What does the group need to do to have more of those inflow meetings? Let's talk about that. Well, if we do this, if we ask these questions ahead of time,
if we structure the meeting this way, what are the pieces that will allow us to have a more engaged day?
But you have to have the awareness first. Mm-hmm. If you don't know what you look like in those two different ways, and of course it's a continuum, it's not one or the other. Mm. But if you're not aware of it, if you're not picking up a sudden being aware of who you are together, there's no way to really design what you're looking to actually create.
You don't go straight to the right side of the hill, right? Yeah. You're asking people to look at the left first.
And experiment with it. Try one little thing.
And what about for the critics going, oh, well, this sounds great, but aren't you just turning teams into Pollyannas who deny reality, and they're not prepared then to face the hard realities of their market situation or whatever it might be? And would you ever get that kind of pushback?
There are definitely people who push back, and then once they're in it, they realize. But by invitation, they don't have to take part, but they realize.
And it's an interesting piece. I don't think stress is a problem. It's pointing at something that's important.
We call it stress as a messenger.
So there's a bear market going on right now. That is the landscape. Okay, first I want to check in what stories are in my filing system that might limit how well I show up in this situation.
But what's interesting is we've grown up in a world where stress is a warning sign.
Yes.
Right? So then we do our whole neural circuitry of stress. But if you look at stress as a messaging system, it's like getting a text on your phone. It's alerting you to something. And what we find it's alerting us to is what actually really matters to us. So if I have a file in the system that feels stress over this thing happening, it doesn't exist on its own. It is always connected to a second file that actually is what I care about, what I value, what matters to me. So I will never have some belief that that's wrong or bad or I don't like it, unless there's either a value or something that's being stepped on or being honored. Like they don't just, you don't get birthed thinking people should do this. Like it comes from how we experience the world over time. So when we take a group and say, okay, yes, you got some stress in your system right now. I will never deny that I have stress in my system. And ask anyone who knows me, I am not a Pollyanna and I don't like rose-colored glasses because I feel like that's a push it down and let's pretend. Yeah. And I don't have the luxury of pretending because it's here, right? So instead, I'm looking at what is feeling stressful. What is the file that's linked to? Normally, stress as a warning system says, take action from file 1 about what we're stressed about. And when I pause for a moment in that awareness space, I can find file 2. Why am I mad that happened with that client? Because this matters to me. All right. What's the action we can take based on file 2 about what matters to us? And that changes the game. Now you're still seeing the stress. You are absolutely being aware of it. But it becomes it's less chronic stress and more like, let me use this. It's a text message saying this. Okay. Stress is just our subconscious mind trying to get our attention. It just wants us to do something.
Yeah. And this isn't about like push the signal down or ignore the signal. It's just have a different relationship with the signal.
Exactly.
Use the signal because there's information there.
It's
about what you value, what you want to design, what you want to move towards. Like, yeah.
And it sort of feels like a paradox in a sense. It's like be fully in your body and totally sort of sensible to all of the signals and be above it, right? Or adjacent to it, right? And create a new pathway or a new story.
Well, it's a dance that you're trying to engage in because, anywhere from 95 to 99% of our actions are subconscious patterns that just run.
It's the filing system working for us.
It's led down the left side of the hill. Something happens and boom, I'm off. So in any given situation, being able to pause and being able to pause is a neural pathway you need to engage. Stress happens, pause. That's a neural pathway all in itself.
Sometimes I can't do it.
Sure.
It's not like I'm always aware. Or sometimes I'm like, God, there's me doing that again, and I can't get out of it. I can't get out of it. I don't know how to get out of it right now.
Yeah. You can't get to that first step of the pause and the observe. Is that right?
Yeah. Sometimes I can't get there because it's just running, and I believe my story that we're gonna be alone and unloved. And there's this in this space. It's like, oh, okay. I need to be able to build my curated vault of things down the right side of the hill that are options for the future. And then as I build those options, the future might be 2 minutes from now, but I want options. Mm-hmm. I want an option.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. That's what's coming to me. I'm just imagining your group with all your joy, positive emotions, and the pictures associated with them, right? That's like increasing your option space for other pathways, other files.
I'm also fascinated by the positive emotions experiment because it feels like a way to shift loneliness, especially for like people who live alone or aren't engaging with a lot of people. When you get that, you do get a dopamine hit of the other people sending you their positive emotion. Like the smiles I've had on my face from like the image somebody chose or how funny it was or how much I like feel the same. There's a thing with whoever your group is. I think I'm in 8 different ones right now. I've got some people 1-to-1 and some people groups of 3 or 4 because we're in this experimental phase. And it's just like total joy that ding is like exciting. And there is a feeling of disconnection, and that's a random thing. We don't have to do it in the morning or at a certain time. Like sometimes I forget about it and I do it at 11 o'clock at night. Like, but I'm still doing it, right?
Yeah.
But I'm feeling the joy and the connection to other people.
And it strikes me as a great way to use social media, right?
Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
It's like the anti-social media.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I love that. Yeah. Wow, what a conversation this has been. And is there anything? Because I realize we've touched on a lot of your approach as we've been through this conversation. But is there anything specifically we've missed in terms of how you work with teams and and what you do with collaborative awareness?
Anything we've missed? Oh my gosh. I feel like, we can talk about this stuff all day long. There's a zillion things we could talk about. I do think the main, like the fire in us really is about creating a design that works for everybody, for people to understand how much they can design who they are with other people, with also including what are the goals we have? What do we need to accomplish this quarter? Like, it's not devoid of all the other things you're doing. Your roles and responsibilities, all those things are included in a blueprint of we. And I love that you can merge those together. I think when we first started, you talked about, or maybe this was another time, you had talked about how the blueprint can be used as a contract.
Yeah, that's what first drew me to the work. Actually, I got a lot more interested in your story, Maureen. But to begin with, I was like, "Oh, this is a very interesting way to look at how we might do contracts between
right.
Yes.
That was an interesting evolution. So we were originally just doing blueprints as contracts with our clients. We went through a time where we'd done blueprints in our personal life enough. We're like, this is changing things, and we knew we didn't feel comfortable with traditional contracts anymore because they were so who's at fault focused and
penalty
driven. Yeah. So we made this what we thought was the scariest decision of our business, to not do any legal contracts in business anymore and only use the blueprint of we as our contracting process. So it still contains, there's a custom design component where you add all of the traditional things a contract might cover, like what's the money exchange and when it's due and timeframes and what you're building, whatever that is. So we decided we wanted to use the blueprint. We were going to tell all our clients that, who are, our clients are corporations and governments and universities, people who live and die by their contracts, right? And we thought we'd lose all of our clients. We were going to give them colleagues that we could pass them off to if they thought they couldn't do that. And in all these years, not one company has said no to it. It's been absolutely fascinating. In fact, they go on to create them as contracts in their own business.
Well, that's the proof of the pudding, right?
Right?
They're using them with their other.
The more surprising part was we started getting contacted by lawyers and mediators around the world who said, like, this holds up. Even judges have told us this holds up in a court of law as much as any other legal contract does, except you also have the relationship, like woven into it, where normally I sign a contract and it's like party A and party B, like forget our names, like let's make this as impersonal as possible. And we've never heard from anyone who said, I've used this as a contract and now we're going to court and the judge is actually looking at it. But I would imagine, well, hopefully, because you're doing it, you don't have to go to court. But if you did, if a judge looked at that document and all that was created around who you were and how you handle stress, they might make a very different decision because they're looking at the whole ecosystem of who these people are within this agreement that they're making. Because I think agreements are incredibly important. But I want the whole to be taken into consideration when we make the decision about agreements. There's also a portion of the blueprint of we that's basically your own third-party mediator tool. It's included, but it's the group's emotional intelligence ahead of time on paper that you use when you're in stress, which is amazing because when I'm in stress, everything shuts down that would be really good in the moment. I show up as all the parts of me that aren't so good in the moment and I can't access them. But when it's on a piece of paper in front of you and it's like, okay, question 4 that we wrote a year ago, let's all answer that one in an effort to get back to a more connected inflow space to make better decisions and move past whatever was going on. Or what often happens, this is the really cool part of using it's called questions for peace and possibility within the document. By using those things we wrote ahead of time, what we found over the years is that groups actually, what ended up happening was like more design and more beautiful things were being built out of the stress in the system. So it's recognizing their stress. I'm upset with you. You're upset with me. This isn't going well. Okay. By the end of the using your own questions, it's like, oh, well, now we can design it this way. And so it used to just be called questions to return to peace. And then we changed it to questions for peace and possibility because so many possibilities started happening because they were using stress as a messaging system and using their own internal emotional intelligence to get there, which is fascinating.
Yeah. And I like the way that the group themselves or the parties themselves define those questions, right? Because there are a lot of kind of conscious business modalities out there and structures for doing business in a more conscious way that have a prescribed set of processes and questions. What I like here is in some sense you've got a process that you're laying out, but there's a great deal of design that goes into it.
Right. And you could add, like, one of your questions for peace and possibility could be, let's use the such and such questions in that model. You could bring in external things that are already working for you, but you're also dropping your own wisdom in as well. And it's questions and reminders. And one of ours is like, go for a walk before we sit down and talk. Like, just what are the things that can be helpful in getting us to find that calm, connected side, the right side of the snowy hill instead of the left?
Yeah. Yeah. I think you've ingrained this snowy hill into me for life, Maureen.
Excellent.
It's great.
Pick up the sled.
Yeah. Fantastic. Good. Okay. Well, I mean, this has just been a brilliant conversation. But I think I could go on forever. But it's getting towards my kids' bedtime here, so I need to start keeping my agreements. But yeah, no, this is wonderful. So again, remind people, and especially for those who are just listening, the website, where they can go if they want to connect with you guys and are curious about what you're offering.
Sure. It's collaborateawareness.com. You can also go to blueprintofwe.com. They come to the same place. You can use either way in.
Right.
And there are many documents in our collaboration store for various types of relationships, both personal and professional, in order to start your own blueprint of we. We have coaches all over the world who help people to create their blueprints of we and learn and use the tools in groups or individually, or how to write your blueprint of me. There's also a type of blueprint that's an introduction blueprint. It's just sort of an overview of an organization or your business. It's a great way to introduce yourself through the lens of the 5 components, kind of like the blueprint of me for organizations. So there's many ways that you can get started really easily and begin using this to pick up the sled.
Yeah. I'm just imagining blueprint of weed.
Yes, that's
down the hill.
Yes.
So it's my kids do that when we go down a hill in the car. They're like, I need a weed.
Oh, exactly.
Brilliant. Okay. Fantastic. Well, thanks again. Thanks again, Zelle and Maureen. This has been brilliant. Can't wait to, it's already out there, but to spread this out to as many people who need this message is fantastic.
Thank you for the work you're doing in the world.
Yes.
I really appreciate the conversations that you're having, how you make them accessible to so many people. It's really brilliant work and really lovely to experience.
Excellent. All right. Thanks once again, and have a fantastic day.
Great. Thanks, Richard.
Thank you.
Thank
Bye.
you.